Hey everyone, welcome to another TAILEATERS discussion. I'm Lee,
I'm Andrew.
and we're talking about the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference that Andrew and I went to just recently in this early November. We talk about some of the things that we learned from the conference itself, what we liked, what we didn't like, hopeful improvements in the future, and some of our takeaways. Overall, I think Andrew and I both thought it was a good conference, right, Andrew?
Yeah, man, it was good. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll just get to it. I really enjoyed Paul Stamets speaking there at the conference. I thought that was really interesting. He had whatever he said was very well presented. He didn't plan it out. I mean, he had a plan, but he didn't like read off a script or anything like that. And he's a much more scientific person, so that really appealed to me. Versus like some of the other speakers were very well. They followed a script, they kind of resulted to their opinions and things like that, and it seemed like Paul Stamets kind of kept away from that. I don't know.
What was one of your favorite things that Paul Stamets talked about that you took away?
Um, well, the stuff that was kind of unique that I thought was unique to me, that I haven't heard before, was him talking about the how to extract psilocybin kind of from some of the mushrooms. That was kind of cool, and he
Well,
used
what
like
what was that? What was that extraction method? Do you
I
recall?
don't really know the process, but it was like using ice to like cold water extract the psilocybin. So I'd probably have to look more into it to figure out like what he was talking about. But it seemed kind of interesting. I don't really know if it was like more potent or anything like that, or maybe more powerful than say making a tea out of it. I don't really understand like why that was so appealing to me. That it was different, maybe because it's just different and it looked cool. And so, but I don't know the inner workings of why that's a better process than like making a tea or something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely very helpful. He also talked about, yeah, I want to try extracting it myself with the cold method. That'd be great because it seemed easy. It's not kind of foolproof. It just seemed like you put ice in a glass with some psilocybin, let it sit for a few days in the fridge, and then voila, you got blue juice.
Yeah. That you can
Uh,
freeze too, man. Make ice cubes out of it. Keep it, I
yeah.
guess. That's
The
kind
other
of
thing,
cool.
oh, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the blue light because he
Yeah.
talked about a certain wavelength, and I wrote down the wavelength for the blue light, which I can find maybe, but it was whatever it was, but whatever the wavelength, the blue light was that it was just a much better growing condition. I should, find it real quick just because. Okay, it's 320 to 400 millimeters. It stimulates production of psilocybin when
Huh.
you're in that wavelength of blue light. So,
Interesting.
for,
Yes.
yeah,
So maybe people that are growing them should probably use like more of a blue light versus like the typical plant growing light that most people I think use. So
yeah,
that was
yeah.
yeah, that was interesting, man. I noticed that too. Another thing that blew me away, but I've seen it before, is like the mycelium networks in relation to like the network of the cosmos and the human brain, and also neural networks in computers. I thought that was kind of obvious that they look like that, before, but at the same time, it's kind of like he didn't say like these things are mycelium or they react the same way as mycelium. He kind of presented it in a way of saying these are just patterns. These are patterns that repeat themselves throughout the universe, and so in that way, it was interesting to see that mycelium, something so small, delicate, also is like so it expresses itself throughout the universe. So it's like it's not just by chance that it happens that way. It's not by chance that the human brain it looks like that under a microscope. It seems that it's a pattern that just like other patterns throughout. universe, round circles, things like that. But it's just another one of those patterns that seems to happen for communication, some type of communication. Definitely.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's like this basic pattern of how some kind of consciousness or intelligence develops, and it was interesting to see how in artificial intelligence, the neural networks of artificial intelligence are following the same similar mycelial network patterns of that fungus that's growing under our very feet follows the same pattern.
Yeah.
Very, uh, I mean, it seems like they're definitely onto something. The computer programmers are developing artificial intelligence. They're on the path.
Yeah, definitely.
Like,
Well, I mean, what does that mean for when you zoom so far out of the known universe and it looks the same way? What does that mean?
you mean our whole universe structure?
Right, because I mean, we're talking about intelligence of mycelium's intelligent, human brain's intelligent, neural networks are intelligent, or at least getting there. They have some type of intelligence. And then you zoom out, and you see the entire known universe, and it looks exact. It has the same structure to it. Does that mean that's intelligent? That's kind of a weird thing to think about. I think.
That's what I didn't wouldn't. Yeah, that's a that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. It's,
How does how does that network of the universe, how is it interlinked, and how is it possibly forming some kind of maybe intelligent being that we aren't aware of,
yeah.
that it definitely follows.
Yeah, man. I mean, what was your perspective of like? So I mean, the first day we arrived to, we both went to the same conference. We went to the Spirit Plant Medicine conference. We arrived there and we checked in. Met some people. I think we both kind of met some people there that were unique. And we met up with some people that I had talked to before. Like the Navy veteran guy, and that was kind of interesting. He was a cool guy. But I mean, like, what did you kind of get out of like the social aspect of the conference? When you on the first day, what was your perspective of that? And then, um, like, what was that a key point of your experience, or um, did you mostly were you mostly interested in the presenters?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably that was the thing I was most hopeful about, was the social connections I would gain. I'm a quiet person by nature, and it was surprisingly difficult to meet new people at the conference, given we all had a lot of things in common. Um, I felt it would have been helpful to have more of a kind of a networking built into the conference, where people would have been, icebreaker idea, where people are forced to now talk to each other in some sense.
Yeah,
That might have been helpful, because I sensed that there was a lot of that were people that are very similar to me. There was just quiet and kind of introverted, and so not there wasn't like a not there was a lot of people not introducing themselves.
yeah.
There's like this mutual quietness. What did you find it? Did you meet more people than me, or?
I found it difficult to really meet people too, like what you were saying. But I did notice, and Christy, my wife, she's very vocal and like willing to kind of go out of her comfort box more so than you and I are, and talk to people. So that was kind of helpful because she would just be like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing?" And I kind of noticed that people when I'd say, "Hey, waiting in line" or something like that, I'm not doing anything, so I'd be like, unless I was talking to you. But if you're gone and she was gone, then I'm sitting there just waiting in line, and I'd be like, "Hey, what brought you guys to this conference?" Because obviously they're interested in plant medicine, be that psychedelics or cannabis, I guess. Most likely they're into some deeper stuff. So just bringing up that conversation with them, they immediately start spilling the beans about their experiences and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, that worked out. But then as soon as the line moved on, those people disappeared, and then my talking to them kind of went with it too. They kind of went in their own little bubble. But it was odd that you and I both had like dinner with a guy, from Canada there, and he just kind of like heard us over talking in a bar, and he was like, "Hey, you guys go for the conference? Can I eat with you?" He was very outgoing, it seemed, and I was like, "Well, like maybe I should be like that a little bit more," but I'm not. But he probably didn't have a very hard time bringing up conversations with people and meeting, people like him in that way. But yeah, I mean, I would have probably liked to be maybe more forced into a social way than it provided. Waiting in line was just not doing it for me. So
Did you find any kind of common patterns in talking to the people and in what people talked about with their experiences with psychedelics? Did you find any kind of shared patterns between either their experiences or in the people themselves? Did you detect anything like that?
yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier, but definitely found patterns with I mean, the psychedelic experience. I think people are trying to use it to better themselves, so that's like a pattern that is immediately presented with this idea that you're not good enough, and you have to continually do something in order to improve. So I mean, that's generally all society. I think today is kind of bent on this idea that we have to we have to do something to improve our situation, or we have to redeem our, especially Western views. I think are this idea that we have to redeem ourselves for the sins of the past, and and as we might try to get away from that monotheistic view of reality in that one, the Christian God or whatever. But sin is still part of our culture, regardless if we call it that or not. We're still sinful for our past, and there's no moving on. Even saying that, like say, oh, there is no such thing as past sin, move on, be free. That if you said that in popular media today, you'd be fired, because everyone's been on this idea that we have to continually pay for our past sins of our families or whatever. So out of our culture, um, Canada seems to be very closely aligned with that, as well as the um, as majority of the world. I think besides like Russia and China, they don't really care about past sins. They're like, whatever, we're moving on, we're doing whatever we're doing, and so we look at that as bad, though. But it is the way. I think that was a common theme in people, and so it's kind of interesting to see people trying to maximize the psychedelic experience, or and to be all honest with you, like for some reason it didn't connect to my brain until later on in the conference that I was at a spirit plant medicine conference. I was thinking um, psychedelic conference. But when you put in plant medicine into it, it means that you're trying to heal something, you're trying to improve something. And
Yeah.
that's when it connected to me. I was like, oh, these people are really into healing themselves or transforming, doing something with this versus just having an experience. And so that kind of, and they treat it as sacraments, which is religious context to it, that this is some type of religious practice in a way. So healing their spirit, things like that. What did you take about from that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting insight. The medicine, just using the term medicine suggests, it's the goal is healing. Um, Never thought about that. I guess, yeah, the common thing I found is that, uh, with the psychedelic experience of some of the more intense ones like psilocybin and ayahuasca and maybe mescaline or peyote, maybe these things seem to give a just this kind of common visionary experience that Um, and I felt that the people I talked to, but also especially the speakers, they were very much they're very much on the train of let's use this to transform society. Let's use this to change the world for the better, and their view. And that was also my view going in as well. That these things are definitely a tool to change society. And it was absolutely clear that the people there believed that this was going to transform society for the better. There was no, um, and so it's interesting that people came almost universally to that same conclusion. I absolutely did not expect that going in. I don't sure what I expected going in, but did not expect a lot of people to be, yeah, let's use this to either, you either get on. I mean, Paul Stamets said, get on the bus or get off the bus.
Yeah.
And it was, it didn't stop with him. It was just everyone that was like, yeah, our world's going to hell in a handbasket. Let's use psychedelics to now change that direction. So that's interesting. And so that there was a huge undercurrent of that being the goal. And and it probably helps kind of understand maybe the future of where they want to take it, and 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 why. Uh, I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. But did you have any expectations going in about what you expected to find there, or what you were hoping to get out of the conference before you went?
I don't know. I don't really. I didn't really think about what I was trying to expect to get out of it. Like I was just really interested. Personally, I was really just interested in seeing Dennis McKenna and Paul Stamets, and maybe Claudia too. And so didn't get to see Claudia, but got to see the other two. So that was cool. But at the same time, I didn't expect to learn so much about other people and myself from interacting with such a. I've never had a chance to interact with that large amount of people in one space that are with a specific type of view. So I haven't done that since I was in church as a Christian. This was it seemed it started resonating to me that this was it's a tribe of people that have a very specific belief system, and you could say so about the military as well. So and maybe I experienced it there too, is a group of people that have one specific group or view. But the difference I think with this is that it was one time in my life where I was with a group of people and I doesn't necessarily agree with everything they were saying. I wasn't like part of that group, and I realized that pretty quickly that I'm more of like a fence setter when it comes to like um, the psychedelic experience. I'm like in between. I'm not like I wasn't them and I wasn't against them, but I was very in between. And um, so I learned a lot about myself from that experience and observing other people. And I also learned a lot about people from the speakers and what they kind of believed, and where the psychedelic community is kind of what direction I'd say the majority of these people are going into. And that was eye opening. And the last thing it really showed me is that um, though there's great movements being made in the psychedelic community towards like research and things like that, I think it drastically needs more people that are well grounded, scientific, and have their stuff together when it comes to like promoting these aspects of um, these healing tools, so that people can so that when we do make changes, or the changes that we want to make, we can actually do that in a productive way, not just like creating another belief system.
Hmm.
So hopefully that made sense.
Do you feel that there were some improvements there, or some general things that could be strengthened to improve the more scientific mindset, or a more objective or grounded mindset
Yeah.
uh, in the conference?
Yeah, I mean the psilocybin or the psychedelic group from Oregon. The not to call them out or anything like that, but their presentation was very it was kind of new agey. Had a lot of terms in there about holistic healing, things like that, which um, the consciousness and transformative studies groups, that I've been studying, it mirrored that like 100%. It was like the same stuff. To me, I mean, that's great and all that you can heal people and you can train them to have a better life or whatever and integrate things better into their life. That's great and all, but what we really need is hard science, the hard facts about psychedelics when it comes to trying to promote change in the government and things like that and society as large, because generally they're not going to listen to that. The people that are the people that are in charge, the Republicans and people like that, they're more narrow minded maybe about their views, and they have the opposite view. They generally don't look at these things as they're not interested in really holistic healing or anything like that. Those kind of things blow over their head, and they generally think those are negatives. So what they do listen to though is hard science about healing effects through like cancers or PTSD or depression, because everyone has those effects. Even people that take psychedelics still have those things. So but you can use them as a tool to do that. And if the more people talk about those things, the more logical thinkers or grounded thinkers and stuff like that. Not saying the Republicans are grounded or logical thinkers, but those groups of people will definitely start listening more because they have those problems. They don't want to hear about stuff they don't have problems with, or how a psychedelic can open their mind, whatever. They're not interested in that. They're interested in its effects to fix their problems. So that's why they're probably going to legalize it or change their scheduling, which the FDA is, based on hard research. So that's kind of
So
one thing I took from that.
that's interesting. So like that language of like because that there was a there was a major theme of holism. I mean, becoming whole and integrated through psychedelics, and it sounds like that you found that language to be, I mean, perhaps too abstract or too. It's hard to relate to that language. Whereas maybe relating it in the sense of, well, taking psilocybin increases empathy, or taking psilocybin decreases symptoms of fear response or anxiety or XYZ, does many things, and the science shows that. So is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, totally, dude. I mean, what was your view on that? Like, um, I forget what your question was originally, but um, like what did you get from the discussions, and do you think these discussions are actually going to make change that they want?
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little deflated. I mean, I came in very excited in general about psychedelics, and then I came in as well seeing how. I mean, I would say the biggest takeaway I came away with, and it was very challenging for me, was that um, okay, I see psychedelics as a way of kind of dampening the ego or helping transform the ego into maybe a more beneficial direction. And and a major theme of the conference, and as well in some of the many of the people that I encountered, and a lot of the speakers, and in my because it reflected myself as well, was that the ego had simply been transformed. The ego had not gone anywhere. The ego was every bit as there as it was. Uh, I mean, it's there for someone who's never taken psychedelics. It's just another mask. Um, so I sense I picked up on that immediately. It was kind of difficult to see that, because I was like, well, what's the outcome of this? Is there are there changes, or do these things actually do anything to the ego, or can they be used to change the ego? And that was a major theme as well. And so it's something that sat with me, that of thinking, okay, what are these things actually doing? Are they are they just kind of people just hiding their ego in a new form through this? Well, the last speaker called it the spiritual ego, and the spiritual ego is this form of where the ego is now transformed in this concept of I'm better than you because, well, I'm more in touch with my spirit, and I'm holier than thou, and look at me, I'm living simple, and I'm doing this and that, and I'm in tune with my feminine side, and yada yada yada, whatever you want to say about it. And it's like, well, it's just gotten changed into another form, and so that was kind of the biggest question I came away with. I mean, a takeaway, and I guess the answer that I've come to in thinking about it after the last few days was um, that maybe the goal of really these things is dissolving the ego is kind of a foolhardy quest. It's that dissolving the ego is not something that's a realistic goal. Um, but in a real, very real way, it can show you the ego in a sense of how it might be affecting your life and the lives of those around you, and that's helpful, and I feel like some of the speakers at the conference understood that. There was a last speaker named Bruce Sanguin who who showed this picture of himself, and in this picture he was kind of like I mean, I can't do it justice, but he had these colorful robes on, and he basically had this very much Messiah complex, and he laughed about it because he's like, look at me, this is my ego. This is my ego before I was a preacher, and I was a preacher for 30 years, and he's photogenic and all these things, and now he's this person who's like this plain jeans kind of guy. He's just this normal dude, and would never think he's taking psychedelics. And um, he talked a lot about this spiritual ego concept, and I feel like he was he was kind of giving the whole audience. It was actually a very good way to end the conference, because that challenged me more than anything, because it's this idea of judging others because they're not using psychedelics, or telling others that you need to use psychedelics to improve your life. Your life is a mess unless you use psychedelics. Getting involved in the mental health system, that's not the way to do it. Psychedelics are the way. It's my way. And there might be truth to that, but with this Bruce Sanguin guy, he really kind of showed how himself and basically everyone in the whole conference and all the speakers, it's like, be careful, because your ego is just now taking on a new form, and don't let it now be pernicious. Don't let it now control your life in a new way, and that now you're hyper focused on this perfectionist state of being in touch with the spiritual realm and all these other things. It's like, that's maybe not the way to go about it. The way perhaps to go about it is just, hey, these things are experiences. They teach us things. They give us lessons. They give us insights. But be very careful, because the ego is it's like having something in the back seat of your car. It's if you don't look in your rearview mirror, that doesn't mean it's not there. So it's always riding along with you, whether you look at it or not. And so if you take psychedelics thinking, oh, well, I've come to this place, my ego's gone, I'm good, I'm healed. Well, guess what? That thing's still in the back seat. You're just not looking in the rearview mirror anymore. And that was my main takeaway. And I thought that was an incredible lesson for me, because um, yeah, otherwise I felt like I was kind of under an illusion that I had diminished this ego, this shadow part of myself, and in reality, it's like I'm just more aware of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and it's still there. It's every bit there, and now I can, being aware of it, I can hopefully um, not let it affect my life in some of the ways that it has affected my life, and but it's always going to be there, and it's a companion I'm going to have the rest of my life, and it can be disappointing to hear at first for someone who's had mental health problems, and they're looking for something to solve that, and but it's also it's very helpful to say, well, I'm aware of it now, and it's um, I can still use this as a way to ground myself and improve upon.
Yeah, definitely. Um, got some feedback in our lap. It's been coming and going. It's weird.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. It's probably a connection issue. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I noticed pretty quickly that people that go to a conference don't go to any conference to diminish their ego. You know, like you're you're listening to you have 400 or 500 people listening to this person on stage talking about their research or their life experiences or whatever, you know, and
yeah.
you're sitting there and you're like, I want to be that person. How can I be that person? And more people I talked to at the conference, a lot of them mentioned they want to do something. They want to be part of this community. They want to do something. What can they do to help? You know, and it's like, um, where where does that where does that come from? Is that the ego? Trying to say, I need to be important. I need to experience. I need to be looked at as the keeper of knowledge or whatever. And so it was kind of it took me back when I was like, oh, like I started feeling like that, this anxiety almost, where I'm like, I need to do something, I need to do something. And it lasted a couple days after the conference. It's still kind of here. I'm like, ugh, I need to, I feel like I need to release information versus like do something just so I can get rid of it, this feeling that I have to do something. And um, so yeah, it was kind of, I mean, it was good because I learned so much about myself from this experience. It was in a way psychedelic. It changed my mind without me taking any drugs. But at the same time, um, it it was kind of disappointing to see that there were so many people also still in the same trap that I've always been in, and they really haven't figured anything out. They just kind of moved around this ego spot. They're in the different areas of their consciousness thinking that they fix their problems. And they're really just the same level, or
Did
even
you
some of them worse, maybe.
did you sense that there was an awareness that this possible that it had just simply moved spots and it hadn't gone anywhere? Really, it hadn't left. It just moved spots. Did you feel like there was an awareness that this was the case for others?
Um, yeah, I couldn't hear your question, dude. Sorry. The Something with your mic, I think.
Okay, well, uh, yeah, I don't know what's going on. So,
Let me mute you and then unmute you real quick. See if that'll fix it. Can you say something
well,
now?
my video is a little weak too.
Yeah, it's definitely you. Because I muted you and it
Huh.
went away. It's
Yeah,
okay. That's why we're practicing.
yeah, I don't see if I can figure it out, but well, it's. Well, I mean, I guess the question was, did you sense that there was an awareness among other participants that came to the conference? Do you feel like they were aware that maybe this ego concept had just simply changed forms, that it just moved around to a different place in the brain? It was still there. Did you pick up that other people were kind of aware that this was the case?
No, not really, man. And in all honesty, I started feeling kind of uncomfortable being at the conference because it hit me. Like I'm not better than they are, but suddenly, maybe because of the experiences I've had in the military, where I have to listen to something that I generally don't agree with, and I'm forced to listen to it. So I can't leave. I'm just like stuck there. And um, but doing that over and over again has trained my brain to recognize when I disagree with something, and like smells like bullshit, probably is bullshit, kind of thing. And and me drinking like 3 cups of coffee when I don't generally drink coffee, mixed together with that, maybe it just finally it was like boom. I was like, oh god, like I've just I'm in a group of people that I generally don't agree with. What is going on? And then looking around, and hearing people clap at certain things and stuff like that. You get the feeling pretty quickly that you're out of your element. Like this is one group of people believing in a certain way. It's a church, essentially. It becomes a church, and if you disagree with that view, then they may not, they may not laugh at you or kick you out of the room, but they'll show you, they'll give you your hat and show you the way out if you continue to do it. Probably, if you're disruptive or anything like that.
That concept you brought up the church idea earlier, and it's an interesting idea. I mean, because you have more experience in a kind of a religious organization than I do. What do you feel are some of the advantages and disadvantages of them potentially taking this spirit plant medicine idea and maybe the whole conference of an idea into more of a religious direction? Do you feel there are some positives and negatives to that movement?
Um, yeah, I mean, like with any religion, there's positives, I think, and there's negatives to it. So, but I think for myself, my personal views is that religion's not necessarily bad, and it's not necessarily good. It just kind of is. It's like a natural thing that people try to they kind of go towards eventually. Um, and so it's hard to say like if it's bad or good, but I think any um, oversimplification of an idea or any kind of like group thought that turns into it excludes any outer ideas into it, then that becomes dangerous because then you have a unified thought versus like um, a constructive thinking and a dialogue. You just have a group thought, not dialogue, and it becomes. I think that becomes super dangerous. Um,
Uh,
as dangerous as any other fun, religious groups that become um, uh, dangerous as well. Like Muslim beliefs are not dangerous in nature. People would say that, but there are fundamental or extremists in that religious group that kill people, and there's also extremists in Christianity, and there's extremists in Buddhism, and there's extremists in every religion. And I don't think that psychedelics is limited to having the same extremism being applied towards it. I would call them this religious movement like the Mother Earth movement or something like that, or Mother Earth Goddess church, Church of the Mother Goddess or something like that. It's interesting. It's kind of like a new religion.
yeah, that's an interesting idea. So it's kind of like you have a concern about any structure, any organization that has when they have group thought or like an ideology.
Yeah,
That's a concerning thing for you with any religion.
I think it's
That's
really
right.
concerning because being in the military, you can see how group thought can become very dangerous very quickly. I think, and the psychedelic community is very against probably most of them are very against any type of form of like aggressive behavior like the military is. They'd be against the military, but the military is like a unified thought towards um, against anything else. It implies weaponry and stuff like that, but the psychedelic community would possibly use language and symbols in order to use as their weapons versus like a gun that kills people. But as we know, in many forms, the pen is mightier, or the pen is mightier than the sword. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, is there? I mean, speaking from taking as a lesson from what we each learned and we each kind of individually took away from the conference. What what might be a more constructive way of case people these psychedelics can benefit people. There's significant scientific evidence is coming out. Particularly with psilocybin, it's got loads and loads of research behind it now. And what is what might be a more constructive direction of taking, spreading the message of psychedelics that would not have those some of those potentially dangerous or often dangerous undertones of ideology or group thought, which we can see where that's led us through history.
Well, I think I mean, this is me just talking some bullshit right now, but
Uh,
um, first of all, I think when you imply like spirituality and religious belief systems into these things, it becomes one sided very quickly. So, like, if somebody went into the psychedelic experience and I told them that Jesus was going to heal them through the experience, I was like, you may see Jesus and he's going to heal you, and that's how it works. The spirit of Jesus, or angels would come to you from Jesus, or God sends angels. All these things start building a psychological picture inside the person's mind that when they take these experience or these substances, they're going to experience that, and then those things do come and heal them. I mean, these are there's accounts of people in South America seeing Jesus. There's churches that are Christian that support ayahuasca use. I mean, this is not just crazy talk. So, um, I've heard that in therapy with psychedelics, sometimes spiritual ideas are used, like Mother Ayahuasca will come heal you or something like that, these subtle themes that there is some type of spirit that's going to come and heal you. I think that is guiding that person to one direction or another. If you said Jesus, if you said Jesus or talked about Jesus in this conference or whatever, people may shun you. They may start looking down at you because they're not interested in that. Generally, they're interested in like Buddhist ideology and things like that, or philosophies, Eastern philosophies. They're not interested in like Western philosophies. So then, like, if you can't do one way, then you shouldn't do the other. And so when you give people psychedelics, I think it'd be important to explain to people that um, in a more realistic way, that how these psychedelics are actually affecting them and how they can change their mind through that, versus like adding all this additional baggage to it. So, I mean, I think more research needs to go into the default mode network that you and I have been talking about, and actually figuring out how that affects the human consciousness. What is human consciousness, without applying the holistic, Eastern philosophies to it, like actually use, you know, even possibly Western views of like Jungian and Freudian methods, which have worked in therapy for, hundreds of years now, and it's very well researched. Apply those to the psychedelic experience when we're doing therapy, and explain to people that these are, archetypes that are possibly communicating, and you're building a way of communication for these archetypes, and that's how you're healing, something like that. All, more of a central idea, versus like a one or the other way. Like, I think science, unfortunately, is one of our best ways is of mediating um, the outside. It's kind of like the middle road, the middle path. It's like this is more of how, agreed upon idea of reality. So, or a test, it's at least testable in some forms. So maybe we should use that versus terminology versus like the more religious or spiritual terminology when we give people these substances, because I think personally what is happening is it's a realignment of the ego that's taking place, and people are taking these substances and they're being realigned to either one way or the other, um, especially if those words are being used. So if you can keep the person centered in their realignment, then hopefully they come out more centered, and I think that would be the ultimate goal. So I think the danger lies in how people are be realigned. And um, even Rick Strassman talked about this. He said psychedelics, he thinks, from all his research, are powerful placebos. They are mechanisms of belief. And when you take them, you are extremely susceptible to new beliefs and ideas, whatever those ideas and beliefs are. So, um, I don't know. What do you think though, man?
Yeah. It's. I think it makes sense. It's like I feel like we shouldn't be. It's hard not to frame the psychedelic experience because we're born into the Western Christian culture, and Jesus Christ is the most powerful symbol for the West. And whether we like it or not, that's what it is. It's because that's how our history is how it's gone. And and I think it's important that like you say that we don't tell people what their experience is going to be. We don't say, I mean, you could say, well, you may have a spiritual or mystical experience because that's what the research says. Research says you're likely to have a spiritual or mystical experience. That's what it says. But it shouldn't be saying what that, what the imagery or symbols of that experience might entail. Um, but also, it's also not, um, telling people about at all. It's all about framing. It's like when you frame something, like framing a question, it's like a leading question. When you frame something, you inevitably kind of affect what will actually occur because they've already got that thing right in their head. It's already speaking to them. They're like, oh well, I'm expecting this to occur, and so it's important that people don't they're not framed in how and what to expect. I think in general it's good not to expect anything, just to go into these experiences and say, okay, I'm just me. Let's let whatever happens, and then leave it at that. And I mean, you don't just leave it at that, but it helps kind of not get too wrapped up in the story. And then, but beyond that, it's I think the most important part is after, because if someone has a say a transcendental experience or however they want to describe it, or they think they've changed permanently, they've something magical has occurred, and then they realize, well, a week later, when you start going back to the same kind of self, because the ego does not go anywhere, it's still there. That it can set people into a kind of a deeper depression than I think they were possibly in
Mm,
before. That's a very real risk, and I think a lot of that comes into expectations before, and also holding on to the expectation, the outcomes after, and and what is most helpful for these experiences, in my view, is would be talking to someone about after what happened during the experience, and talking to someone after the fact, and someone who's and along with that, it's kind of talking to someone who doesn't interpret the experience for you like dreams, telling you this is
mm,
what occurred to you, that this is what that means. It's more taking that Jungian or psycho. It's basically taking a psychoanalytic stance where that person now can interpret their own experiences, and we interpret our own experiences based on, well, the history of our lives, their childhood and trauma, and ultimately a lot of it relates to coming to grips with your past,
mm,
um, and it, like just like dreams, it kind of would be like that, and so I would say that for me, that's the not getting too much into the language of what these things are, and that there's this mother nature, divine, feminine, or whatever, or the mushroom as kind of a Jesus Christ thing. Because that's definitely a very real thing that occurs to people. It's not getting too wrapped up in these ideas that they're coming from our culture, and instead it's like realizing those are just symbols from our culture. The experience itself is what's important, and I feel that's kind of that's most that for me is the most of what's needed in this kind of the psychedelic transformation that society is changing into, where people are now getting a lot more open to the idea. They're thinking, well, maybe I should take it. I mean, other people are using it. Maybe I should, and I 100% feel that in the right context, I feel like they can be helpful for almost everyone. And just a way to go about that is not having not trying to control the experience, not trying to have preconceived notions of what you're going to get out of the experiences. Definitely not thinking that you're going to become a magically better person just by having the experience, because um, and then also it's just finding someone that you can trust, that's not going to put their ideas, their interpretations of your experience into your mind, and realizing it's entirely a subjective experience that is unique to each individual. I feel like that last point for me is the most important, because we live in a world where people do want to interpret each other's lives. That just tends to be how when people talk to each other. And with psychedelics, that is, I find that to be very unhelpful.
Yeah, man,
But
those are really good points.
yeah, so yeah, but it was overall, I felt it was a very good learning experience. I would go again, perhaps because I had preconceived notions going in, certainly myself. So I feel like going again next year, kind of just keeping an open mind, but also just being aware of, okay, maybe seeing, and also seeing maybe the differences from this year to next
Yeah,
year, because my preconceived notion, which we can't escape that, it's with us all the time. I do wonder if it will become more of that religious structure,
yeah,
the religious undertones next year. We'll see. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but uh, I mean, also it just, you know, yeah, I'd say I am excited to go next year, because it was an interesting experience, and there's a lot to gain, but at the same time, it's just it's kind of like playing with fire. So I think we should all be kind of keep keep a keep a reserved kind of part of us, detached from this idea that these things are, that they're anything except unique to us. They're anything but subjective.
yeah.